Hi, I'm Mark Mattioli, and welcome to another installment of my novel Boston Accent. Boston Accent is available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle. And I've been reading this for a while. This is, I think this is the 8th reading. We still barely get into this book. The book is over 300 pages, and I'm only doing 10 to 15 minute readings at a time, so this is going to take a while. I believe we're in chapter 5. High school is where we left off, and I just want to make a reminder to people that as I get into the book, this book is of adult subject matter, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll are going to become more prevalent as we go along. There's going to be some material that some people may not be, comfortable with. I'm assuming everyone who's reading this is an adult, but I don't pull a lot of punches with my writing. This is my nature and life in general. So I'm just giving you a heads up. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say. I think you know what I'm talking about. For some reason, I feel obligated to give you a heads up. All right. That aside, let's get into this. Clock is ticking. Time is money. Okay. The summer I turned 14, I stopped hanging out with Freddie and went back to hanging with the kids that were a bit wild. Freddie was a lot smarter than me and very straight. He didn't smoke or drink or talk about girls the way I did. So I went to the far end of the spectrum with my choice of friends. They weren't too bright, but they were always doing fun things like riding mini bikes and shooting guns. We also did a lot of dangerous and illegal things like making pipe bombs and setting them off in our forts to see what damage they could do. It was also the first time I got high. First, huffing gas, and later that summer I smoked pot for the first time. The gas thing was real bad. The first time I saw my buddy's little brother doing it, I was clueless. It was then that I found out that several kids in the neighborhood were doing it, and they all owned mini bikes. One of them was siphoning gas out of his dad's truck, and learned by accident that breathing the fumes through a hose will get you high, real high. Pretty soon all these kids are hanging in their sheds with a hose either in a gas can or the tank of their bike. If their parents walked in on them, and they did, they would just say they're siphoning gas for their bikes. During this period, I never heard any parents accusing anybody of getting high on gas. They didn't have a clue. When I saw them doing it, I thought it was bullshit, that they were fucking with me. So I tried it, and it was the real deal. I went on to experiment with a lot of drugs when I was younger. Truth be told, there's no experimenting about it. I used drugs a lot. And I have to say that I had more hallucinations from gas than most drugs I bought off the street. It became a bad habit, and one by one, all the kids that were doing it before me had stopped. They had more common sense than I would have given them credit for. I continued to use until my friends grew concerned and started locking their sheds to keep me out. I can remember the effects would last for a good half hour or more from huffing for maybe 10 minutes. If you did it for a half hour, the effects would last for over an hour. I used to go home and eat ice cream, which I found would not only get rid of the buzz immediately, but get rid of that taste of gas in your mouth as well. I dropped that bad habit the same summer I started it when I was introduced to weed. Gary was my neighbor that showed me pot for the first time. The first several times I tried it, nothing happened. Maybe it was shitty weed, I had nothing to compare it to, but I sure wasn't impressed. Gary was a kid that was just destined to do jail time. He would get bored real easy if he wasn't either doing something illegal, something dangerous, or picking on someone smaller than him. One Saturday night, when we were sleeping in the fort behind his house, he woke me up and said, "Time to go mailboxing." I had no idea what that was, but I was up for an adventure, and so off we go into the night. We would walk through the neighborhood, opening mailboxes, checking for little envelopes that had money in them for the guy that delivered the Sunday paper. I remembered my mother fighting with the guy on the phone as he told her she was behind on her payment, and she insisted that she put it in the box. My mom canceled her subscription and made Ralph go down to the corner store after that to get it. Now here I am doing the same thing with the guy that ripped off my mom. It wasn't the last time Gary would cross the line and steal from my family when he thought I wouldn't find out. I confronted him that night, and he denied it, but I knew he was lying. To myself, I said, "Fuck it," and spent the rest of the night ripping off my neighbors. Every time a car came, we would run into the woods. We could see them coming from almost a quarter mile away on some straight roads. I learned to spot them by watching the power lines that were in on the telephone poles. You could see the headlights up there before you could see a car come around a corner. Another advantage we had were the trails we made in the woods. We could travel for miles with hardly ever having to use the street. When we got back to the fort some 4 hours later, I had over $70 in my pocket, and Gary had close to $100. That was a lot of money for two kids our age in 1971. I wish I could say that was the worst thing we did, but it wasn't. Gary would find out when someone was going on vacation and break into their house. Most of the time when he did this, I wasn't with him. I would just hear the story later. I just never had a good feeling about the stealing in general, and I had a premonition that I would get caught. The one time I did participate was when a neighbor that none of us got along with had gone away. Word spread through the neighborhood that the cellar door was open, and half the kids in the neighborhood went into that house. No one was stealing anything of real value. We're all kids on foot, using the trails behind the house and then creeping through the backyard into the cellar. The thing of it is, the next door neighbors were immigrants from Portugal, and all they didn't call the cops. They were watching from their windows and recording names. When the neighbors returned from vacation, they were handed a list of the intruders. I ended up in the police station with my parents the same night as did every other kid who was in that house, except for two girls that the neighbors didn't recognize. The cops had us all in separate rooms, and we all denied it, and no charges were filed. My parents, however, said, "Enough is enough," and brought home brochures from military schools and said, "Pick one, you're going." I told them I would run away, and they would never see me again if they pushed it. This seemed to upset my mom. Ralph seemed to think it was a win-win situation. I won and stayed in public school, but they found something to occupy my time and keep me out of trouble. They called up a neighbor of mine named Earl that had been my scoutmaster when I was younger. Earl was putting together a rifle team that would compete against other towns all over the state. I had handled rifles and shotguns from an early age. I had never done any competing, but I was interested. Earl swung by the house, picked me up, and brought me to the gun club. Earl had 4 sons and a daughter that I knew from scouts, and 3 of them were trying out for the team. There were also several other kids there from Pineville to try out. Most had some experience, some had none. I had a .22 rifle, but a regulation match rifle with match sights was provided by the club. If you won a place in the team, the rifle was yours to take home and clean every week. The junior team had a minimum age of 14 and max of 17. Once you turned 18, you had to join the senior league. I tried out for the team that Saturday, and I got a call that Sunday that I was on the team. For the next 4 years, I spent nearly every Saturday either at the club or on the road competing against other clubs. I loved it, and I was good at it. I stopped hanging with the kids that were headed to jail like Gary, and life at home was a little easier to deal with for a while. The same year I joined the gun club, my sister Lenora was born. After being the only child for so many years, it was a big change to suddenly have siblings, and ones that were so much younger than I. The third anniversary of my accident was uneventful, and it looked like the curse, if one had existed, had ended. That year for Christmas, my mother gave me an electric guitar. The gun club had proved a positive deterrent to a life of crime. Now with the guitar, I would need lessons and hours of practice. My old Dark Shadows companion, Phil, had received a guitar for, that Christmas also. We not only signed up for lessons with the same instructor, but we would schedule our lessons back to back and ride together with our parents taking turns driving. I loved rock and roll, but I found playing a guitar very difficult and lost interest quickly. One day I was over at Phil's and we were jamming on our guitars to records, which is something we did often. Phil put on a new Rolling Stone record, and the song Midnight Realmer came on with the late Brian Jones on harmonica. I was blown away, no pun intended, by not only how powerful the harp sounded, but by the fact that it had taken the lead role in the song. I was sold. I started collecting harmonicas in different keys and buying blues albums, and I never picked up that guitar again. There were garage bands breaking out all over the place with kids my age, and no one played harp. And very few musicians wanted to sing, which I did as well. I played with several bands during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but none of them proved serious. They were just party bands, but it was still a good time. Soon, it was the summer I turned 15, and I was finding myself thinking about young women often. One Saturday night that summer, I spent the night over at Tommy's house. He had cousins visiting from New York, and they had parked a camper in the yard. Tommy's parents had booted him out of his room so his aunt and uncle could sleep there, and Tommy was sleeping in the camper along with two of his cousins. Tommy and his little cousin, the 13-year-old, fell asleep around midnight after Tommy's dad had come out and told us to keep it down. The 16-year-old, Lynn, and I sat together on one of the bunks listening to the radio and talking in low whispers all night. As the sun started to rise, Lynn motioned me to lay down with her, and we fell asleep in each other's arms. The last song I heard on the radio while I was drifting off to sleep was Eric Clapton's Layla. To this day, I can't hear that song without thinking of that morning. I was on the brink of manhood. And I could sense that my life was about to have a huge change, that I would soon walk down a road I had never been down before. Later that morning, when we finally got up, I told Lynn that I needed to head home. She asked if she could walk halfway with me, and I said, of course. We took the woods trail behind Tommy's, and when we were more or less halfway there, we stopped to say goodbye. Lynn asked if she could kiss me, and we embraced and kissed. It was my first serious kiss with a girl. I was very self-conscious that I might not be any good, so I was very gentle and not aggressive. The kiss was long and wonderful. When we stopped, we looked into each other's eyes, and Lynn smiled. One more? My only answer was with my lips as I pressed close to her and drank in everything that was the moment. The taste of her lips, the smell of her skin and hair, I wanted it to go on forever. When we stopped, she asked if I'd ever kissed a girl before, and I answered, not like that. She beamed and said, you're good. And then she turned and walked away, and I never saw her again. Only in my dreams. All right, we're going to call it a day right there and pick it up tomorrow, God willing. The book is Boston Accent. I'm Mark Mattioli, and I'll see you soon. Ciao.